Today's keynote speaker has authored 2 books on millennial consumer trends, Marketing to Millennials and Millennials with Kids, which was released August 2015. He is a frequent contributor to Forbes, and he is also president of FuturePath, a marketing consulting company owned by Indie Ad agency Barclay. He graduated from the Wharton School with a varsity letter in geopolitics. He's excited to be here today. Please welcome millennial wannabe Jeff Fromm.
Thanks, appreciate it. Just a quick roadmap for today's chat. We're going to go through some of the trends we look at a fairly broad level. Then I've invited my colleague, Brad Hanna, to share a few CPG-specific thoughts because I noticed quite a few of the members of the audience were interested in CPG, and we do have deeper dives possible into that space. If you're tweeting along, I'm at Jeff Fromm. I won't be following, but I'll be sure to peek later on. All right, well, for us, this started as a research project back in late 2010 and early 2011, a partnership between Barclay, the Indie Ad agency that is the benevolent corporate parent to FutureCast, Boston Consulting Group, and Service Management Group. At that time, there wasn't a view toward millennial consumer behavior that was in the public space, and so we decided to embark on learning more. And after we published the research, we noticed a lot of people were interested and started paying attention to our data. In fact, as recently as last week, Time Magazine did a story on millennials as parents and leaned into our research for that story. If you're interested in the research, we try to keep it as all of the non-private client research available at millennialmarketing.com on the research tab. Most of the points we're going to cover today are grounded in either our research or research that's been shared with us by other parties. And there are a couple specific things that I wanted to call out that look like this audience might be interested in. On millennialmarketing.com, you can find Who Eats the Meats and the Secret Sauce for the Modern Brand, both from that research tab. There's also an article on Forbes on food brands and what they have to do to win with millennials. And if you type my name into the search bar at Forbes.com, I don't think you'll have any trouble finding that article. So let's dive in. Who are millennials? As a starter, millennials are a non-homogeneous cohort. There are unique segments of millennials. In fact, affluent millennials are a huge emerging target for many brands to consider. There are over 6 million affluent millennials today, defined as having a household income over $100,000. The vast majority of them are over the age of 28. They tend to skew to urban markets. And for some of you, it might be surprising, but 57% of them are female. That's right. 57% of affluent millennials are female, and they can afford to live the aspirational dreams that many millennials talk about but don't always act on. There are also a lot of millennials who are now starting families. Nearly 12 million millennial families exist in this country, and they also have unique segments. I suspect many of you studied Maslow at some point in your life. You're familiar with the need for physiological needs all the way up to self-actualization. When we talk about millennial culture, there's a base need that's really required. It's a connected generation that lives and breathes via the modern day smartphone, which is really mislabeled because it is not a phone. It's rather a Swiss Army knife capable of processing more information about the brands I love from my peer networks, which is the source I trust. I'd like to start by diving into the concept of love. And it's a fairly difficult concept for many. In fact, I can't remember dating. It's been so long. But the concept is simple. You start a new relationship, and if things progress, that relationship progresses. And over time, you build affinity in that relationship. And the challenge that brands face is there's such a proliferation of choice that if you don't avoid boredom, then consumers can divorce your brand, and they don't have to file papers. They move a few feet down the aisle, and they pick an alternative product. So your job is to prevent boredom. And as a result, if you want to be one of the most profitable brands on the planet, you have to create more love. In fact, the formula for creating love with brands is to increase your uniqueness and your meaningfulness or purpose and your innovation as it relates to your brand authority. So let's talk about that for a minute. Uniqueness is a proxy for your pricing authority. The more unique your brand is, the more pricing authority you have. Purpose and meaning create sales volume potential. The more purpose or meaning you create, the more sales volume potential you have. And innovation is part and parcel of what millennials expect from brands. So those are all numerator factors. The denominator is a combination of brand awareness and your net promoter score or overall satisfaction. The reality is, if you want to find the least profitable brands on the planet, show me a brand with really high awareness that isn't dramatically improving their uniqueness, their innovation, and their purpose. And that brand will have less future profits and more consumers who are switching away from that brand. If you want to take it a step further, over time, everything that makes your brand unique tends to be copied by competitors. So you have to move those things into the denominator and consider them price of admission and decide very deliberately as you're planning for 2016 what will be in your numerator. With that, I'd like to dive into the millennial mindset, because the mindset is far more than a demographic. The great modern brands of today understand millennials influence consumers who are over the age of 35. And this influence is very important because you can find plenty of people who are over the age of 35 who have and adopt millennial behaviors. The mindset is defined by 5 major areas around purpose, experience, discovery, community, and innovation. And if you're interested in increasing the demand, either for your existing or new portfolio of products and services that you would create, you have to dive into the mindset factors that are going to drive that demand across age ranges. Great modern brands understand that. Let's look at purpose. You could be a brand that's hated on, like AT&T, and create extraordinary purpose by tapping into a pain point and an issue like don't text and drive. The flip side is you can create an entire brand around the one-for-one movement or tap into the campaign for real beauty like Dove did. All of these brands are tapping into meaning or purpose. Experience is another huge theme for the mindset. Coffee consumption in this country is not increasing on a per capita basis. It is a booming coffee economy because millennials value experiences and they're willing to pay a premium for those experiences. So rather than paying 40 cents for a cup, they're paying $4 for an experience. And this experience is part and parcel of the sharing and co-creation that they seek. Discovery is another big theme. My daughter is 23. She works at Pinterest, and she's constantly working in a business that's all about discovery. And brands that tap into discovery are able to tap into that mindset in a very unique and meaningful way. Community is another big part of millennial culture. Again, brands that tap into community are going to win with millennials. And building community is not just something you do in the physical world, it's a seamless integration to the digital world as well. And then finally, we talked briefly about innovation before. Innovation is something that millennial consumers expect. Heck, if I had known that a business like TaskRabbit could exist and my daughter would pay for people to run errands on her behalf when she's too busy with work at Pinterest, I could have started making money on this long before she moved to San Francisco. So the reality is a lot of the infrastructure to create innovation has already been funded by others because of the development of a variety of systems and ecosystems around the internet. So many of tomorrow's great brands are going to tap into pain points and build on those existing infrastructures. What I'm going to do quickly now is go through some of the brands that are getting right on the mindset and the themes that they're touching. I don't have the ability to share video content, I apologize, so most of this is going to be stories. The first truth is that we believe in brands that stand for more than their bottom line. The corollary could also be said to be true, which is if you stand for nothing more than your bottom line, you don't have much of a chance. Millennials, as consumers and as employees, want brands to stand for more. And so brand behavior becomes part of the new brand positioning. I suspect many of you are very familiar with core user reference point and brand payoff. A core user implies a passive consumer, and that's not millennial culture. And that's not what millennial mindset and great modern brands do. So behavior trumps positioning. Millennials are going to change the world, and they have a sense of purpose and idealism that's very important to understand. They want to co-create that change with great modern brands. So the era of storytelling is going to evolve very dramatically to an era of story living. Story living will be marked by the actions you take and the proof you offer, because consumers who are engaging with these great brands demand proof. Let me give you some examples based on the research we've done. The research very clearly points to things like fairness, inclusivity, and a variety of trends that brands need to understand. One of those brands is Chipotle. Chipotle has an mission statement. It's pretty deep and complicated. Food with integrity. 3 words. Any employee in the company can understand food with integrity. Not long, not winded, not complicated. And when they had a problem in their supply chain, unlike the other 97% of restaurant brands, they didn't hide that. They actually took the problem and they promoted it at the point of sale to consumers who are like-minded, who also said, wow, this is very transparent of Chipotle. And I suspect many of you saw that this year when they had their supply chain problem. The reality is restaurant chains have supply chain problems all the time. Another example of proof in a story living era where actions matter is Tesla. Tesla released their patents to good faith use. Now, most brands don't make their intellectual property available to competitors, both direct and indirect. They're good faith use. So this is proof of their commitment to creating a better planet. And it's bold action. And my favorite example of bold action comes from Apple. Apple made abundantly clear to both the state of Arkansas and the state of Indiana that the new legislation designed to promote inequality in their state, not equality, not what was labeled, but inequality, was unacceptable to Apple. And unlike brands that issued press releases, of which there were hundreds, saying we believe in fairness, Apple went further. They tweeted at the governor, and they made it clear that they would disinvest in those states over time to the point where, if that was the state's decision, Apple's decision would be to remove as many people who work for the company and locations that support the brand as humanly possible, because it wasn't something that they could support. So this is proof of a brand's commitment. And you have to ask yourself, does your brand offer proof to their employees and consumers who you have to win over? The next truth is that we're writing our own story. My traditional milestones look like this. I went to school, I got a job, started a family, etc. Millennials have a different rule, which is there is no order imperative. I can actually start a family without getting married, and I can start a career without necessarily finishing college. And it's not just the billionaires under the age of 30 who left college and sometimes left high school to pursue their dreams. It's others in this group who are saying, I think I'm ready and I'm going to take a leap. And it's just a different model. It's not a linear world. Janis Joplin might have crooned for her Mercedes-Benz. Millennials are crooning for experiences. And they're looking for all kinds of experiences in their lives. Travel experiences, fun and new kinds of adventure experiences, food adventures, right? They love flavor adventures. And food is part of what their life is about. It's a huge part of it. So as you think about this, understand that if you can create affordable adventures, they're not willing to trade off. They want healthy without necessarily paying a lot. They want flavor without necessarily paying a lot. If you can create affordable adventures, you have the chance to really win with this generation. They don't believe in compromising. What happened in 2007, 8, 9 was millennials came out of college. Many of them came out with debt. They couldn't find the jobs they wanted. And there was a private label emergence going on. And so brands that weren't that strong lost out to private label. And the reality is, it's sometimes hard to tell. I mean, is Trader Joe's a private label or a brand? They sell their brand in the store. And you can make an argument for either. The point is, if you have a strong brand, millennials will trade up in favor of that brand. And if your brand is relatively not that strong, they will quickly trade down because they're day traders and they're capable of processing that information and making that choice. The next point is they're experiencing a frictionless journey, and the vast majority of companies aren't organized to deliver on that. They have separate silos for operations, e-commerce, digital, social, and these silos might not be aligned on key performance indicators that deliver on a frictionless journey. So I grew up in an era where people were told if you increased awareness, you would build interest in your brand, and that will lead to an action. And this AIDA model doesn't seem to support future profits in a strong way. Millennials discover, they explore, they purchase, and then they share. They share with their peer networks. And so the brands that create the most energy are going to win in Tomorrowland. You could have 3 or 4% of your consumers who advocate on behalf of your brand, who engage other like-minded consumers, who will then try your brand. So in this world, you have to think about the energy you're creating, not just the awareness you're creating for your brand. These consumers aren't passive. They're no longer a target audience for you. They're co-creators. They're partners. You need to change your language to think about them differently. And you need to stop using the term physical world or digital or social, because they want a seamless experience. The fact is, it isn't digital, it isn't physical, it isn't any of that. It's seamless. The omnichannel language is language that kills innovation. That language is used by big companies to describe the silos. They want seamless, they want frictionless, and you need to start thinking about the language you're using as part of that challenge. One road, not the only road, to go down is around information. Millennials love content, whether that's recipe ideas, whether that's the story and the backstory behind your food and how it was created. They love content. And if they're going to love your brand, they're going to curate content on the brand, they're going to create content on the brand, and they're going to consume content on the brand. So understand the rules of content, which is you need a framework. You need to think about planned and unplanned content, proactive and reactive. You have to develop a strategy for your brand for each quadrant. And within each quadrant, you have to be nimble, and you have to be prepared to move in order to act on that strategy. If you knew me, you know that there's no chance on the planet I would end this discussion with 5 questions. I'd have 40, not 5. But for the purpose of being concise and inviting Brad to share some thoughts on CPG trends, I'd like to leave you with 5. Do you know your brand authority? Everyone knows the products they sell. Do you understand your brand authority? Would you have tweeted at the governor? Because if you understand your brand authority in your Apple, you do. What are the big unmet needs? Have you defined demand opportunities for your brand along the mindset? Because most brands are trampling on snow that's been covered again and again, not looking for the white space. Are you going to create uniqueness? There's abundance of research to prove that the most unique brands have the most pricing authority. I'm going to point you to Young Mi Moon at Harvard Business School. If you're interested in the topic of uniqueness, please take a look at her research. Will you co-create purpose or meaningfulness? Brands that create meaning, whether it's a one-for-one movement, whether you're AT&T and you're a big corporation that is not loved by the planet. If you create meaning and purpose, you create sales volume potential. You must co-create this with them. Finally, you have to be thinking beyond sustaining innovation. I know most great CPG brands have sustaining innovation platforms. I'm going to tell you that great brands in Tomorrowland are going to work on disruptive innovation and sustaining innovation. With that, I'd like to invite my colleague Brad to talk for a couple minutes about the trends he sees in the CPG space, and then hopefully you'll have questions that I can answer as well.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I'm going to cover 4 things that we're seeing across the work we do in food and CPG. And a lot of the things we're working on is clients that are really seeing and brands that are really feeling this erosion and penetration with the younger generation. They're looking at frankly, frequency in a lot of categories going down, loyalty going down, and a lot of those brands are really at a paradox on what to do. What do I do to make sure that I'm nurturing? Because as you see it decline with the younger generation, you're seeing it starting to decline with the older, which is where the millennial mindset comes in. So in a lot of our work, we've been working on those types of categories and really looking at what's happening in those categories and what are some things that can help fix that. One thing we know is that millennials are re-evaluating every category that they use, really trying to find in their savviness what categories are truly there for value and convenience, and what categories are there to live my beliefs and values as an expression of that, and then what brands are doing that within. So one of the big findings we have is that the millennial mindset generation is actually redefining quality. It's less about functional, emotional attributes, and it's really now more aligned to those millennial mindsets that Jeff went through of purpose, experience, discovery, community, and innovation. And within each one of those, there's probably 10 different attributes across every category or food, for example, that are really meaningful. One of the things we're piloting right now is a study that will actually evaluate categories and brands against these mindsets. And we're actually in the process of looking for a couple beta partners for that. But we've done it already in 2 mega categories and have found really the connection to mindsets is critical. Cambridge is our partner on this that we hired to help us with this because we worked with them a lot on some of these bigger brands.
Hey, Brad, let me ask you one question. I noticed that a number of people were in the packaging space, and I know that's one facet, only one facet. Do millennials have some different views around packaging?
Yeah, it's interesting. Packaging and some of our recent work, it's going to be difficult for millennials to pay more for packaging they prefer. What they actually are doing is, again, it aligns to the mindset. Packaging is becoming a reflection of how they look at sustainability, environmental, and transparency. So, a lot of the packaging, though, while it has to be innovative, it's getting to the point where the brands that really understand where the mindsets are going are moving to that kind of packaging because it's just part of another proof point. But we have yet to find real experience where millennials are willing to pay for that benefit. It's more of in this case, an expectation that, of course, a brand that aligns with my beliefs and values would have packaging that is into that sense of environment, transparency and sustainability. The other thing is portion will be, and I think this really leads well into my second point, and how that the millennial generation truly aspires to cook. Food is a huge part of their life. They actually aspire to make more meals at home, but frankly, life just gets in the way. Even when they start bringing in kids in the household, a lot of times for those non-affluent financially, they're trying to eat better food, and that's a challenge because spoilage is so big. So we are finding millennials, obviously they're starting to spend more out of home than in home. But a lot of that transition is happening because they're looking at different usage occasions for food. They're looking at really assembly products where food's more used as an ingredient. They can cook something up quick and then put it on a salad, wrap, topped or rice, and have some left over for tomorrow. They're also looking at things that add a lot of flavor, and they can control that flavor. And then they're looking for things that are, as we call it, things that they can just create with their own participation of adaptation. You look at the app Tasty, on your phone. Tasty has absolutely nailed. It's one of those apps that I'm jealous that we didn't figure out first and move that into a space of how we do recipes. But there's so much personal interpretation that they allow in that Tasty app, and then they show the simplicity of getting great food to the table fast. And that idea of assembly is really going to be key, versus the traditional center of plate type mentality. Also, packaging in that front, we're seeing a lot more with portion, a lot more with, buy what you need, freeze what you need, all done in the same packaging, so that you're not having to bring out extra packaging or rewrap things. There's a convenience movement in that point with portion and really the club stores have started to figure this out in the way they're, putting chicken in packs that you can just tear up what you need and freeze. The last one that I'll go through is really just how communications is evolving. It's very hard for traditional brands, especially brands that are struggling with budgets, to have any impact anymore with traditional tools. And, one of the things that we've been really working on is looking at the role the influencers play to really start inspiring content that then allows us to push that content back to the influencers and for sharing, where they'll be able to share that. And really focusing on content that's pushed from the bottom up versus advertising pushed from the top down. So, we're working with a company that comes out of the CIA that is really designed to find terrorists, and we're piloting a program where we're actually monitoring influencers in certain categories and silent influencers in categories. We're monitoring their conversations, creating content in a matter of a day or an afternoon with a flow team that is structured to just build content, and then we're pushing that content back out through paid posts and through other influencers in order for content to be shared faster. And we're finding that the ability for us to push out content that's, as I say, we're trying to really be, some e-cards to the punch sometimes in how we're discovering things and pushing it out. And that's a really important way for us to do that. The last thing I'd say is that they're also striving for new. We're really, finding a trend where if you have campaigns that run the same campaign or the same promotion over and over and over, you usually get really great engagement on the first one, maybe the second. But by the time you're doing it the third time, if you're not keeping it totally fresh and new, the whole thing is, wow, there's just not as people, engaging as they used to. This generation is looking for something new, and you've got to be daringly innovative in wanting to change your communications faster and experiment more with content, as opposed to looking for the set imagine luggage that you reinforce year after year. That model is just simply gone when it comes to this generation, who is constantly wanting to be stimulated and challenged.
Thanks, Brad. I'd like to pause and grab a couple questions, Stephanie. I'm not seeing them on my screen, so if you want to read them or type them in, I'd be happy to take a couple, because I see we have a few minutes left, if anyone would like to do that. How can I find my brand authority? From Courtney. It's a great question. We were actually giving a presentation to our client Hershey recently on this topic, and they asked, can you literally, put the 7 steps down, and it's a fabulous question. At the risk of oversimplifying, you have to look at what trends in consumer culture are really important and how that aligns to your brand mission. And so you're sort of looking at the intersection of your emotional and tangible brand benefits against consumer culture trends. I've got a long form think piece in draft form, Courtney, that'll be done in another 5 to 7 business days. If you email me, I'm happy to share that with you. But unfortunately, there isn't like a rule, like if you do step 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then it's like a given. But understanding what your brand stands for and then understanding consumer culture becomes important. Obviously, Apple understood their brand. They understood what was going on in these states. And they said, hey, this is what our brand's about, so we're going to act. No different than Chipotle but Chipotle and Tesla were planned, right? So great question. Next question, how to create love experience in packaging. A tricky question, and one I would say probably requires a longer discussion with Brad. If you want to contact me, I'll put you in touch with Brad, Chris. But packaging becomes a big issue because, as Brad said, you have portion issues as well as if the cost isn't any different, then millennials prefer things that are environmentally friendly. But if cost becomes an issue, they may not be willing to pay a premium for that packaging. Brad, do you have anything to add in a short time?
I think what's interesting about the packaging experience is that, and we've done a lot of work with Tetra Pak, on packaging and working with their brand as they push that package out. To me, the love is really created when the packaging just solely fits the use occasion that consumer has. I think packaging has to be more thoughtful in the way it is, used and constructed, and the space it takes up, and the convenience that it provides, the storeability it provides, and that's really, I think, where it's frankly the love is created, and if they just come to more appreciate the thoughtfulness that the package brings to their lives. Again, rarely will they pay for it, but it does add another proof point that we think is something that, again, takes friction out. And I think that's a huge point that packaging has to do, is it has to remove friction, which is where that will happen.
Next question from Franklin, and might be our last question based on time. We talk about love from packaging, we have to consider design, material, sizes. Well, the love concept wasn't specific to packaging. The love concept is much broader, which is to suggest that your job as brand strategy professionals is to prevent boredom. The main drivers of love are going to be around uniqueness and meaningfulness and innovation, not brand awareness. Brand awareness is important, but it's price of admission. So I don't know your brand, and I don't know the packaging issues around your brand, so I can't answer it other than to say what's going to drive uniqueness, what's going to drive meaningfulness,
what's going to drive innovation. You can certainly drop us a note. We're happy to have a dialogue if you want to email us afterwards. Maybe one last question if there is one, and then I think we need to probably be done based on time. I have more time. I just don't know if we can go much longer. Last question. Why is story living, hold on. Why is story living so important? Another great question, Courtney. So story living is so important because brand actions and proof of your actions are what really drives consumers to love brands. And if you look at the great brands today, whether we're talking about Chipotle, Apple, Tesla, Uber, etc., they tend to take actions in favor of their beliefs. Some of this is rooted in the fact that we live in a world with so much choice, where product feature differences and pricing differences and packaging differences are so small that I aspire to do business with brands that align to my values. And so that's a piece of it. And then the other is the authenticity and transparency you've heard so much about. Millennials demand it. And so story living starts to trump storytelling in an era where authenticity becomes so important.
There's a great quote that we use, which is from a consumer standpoint, which is, I love your brand story, but if it doesn't add to mine, it will never be ours. And that's really where that whole concept of story living comes in, which is you have to create those proof points for the consumer to feel like they are part of your brand and it's adding to your consumer's life, and the consumer's life is enriched through it, which really starts from that beliefs and values all the way down. And too many times you have a brand promise that lives on a piece of paper and maybe an advertisement that they see, when it runs, and then, wear out happens. And that's where you never get that participation to where they feel like it's adding. And you can only do that through proof points.
All right, well, thank you all for participating in this Brand Square live session. If you'd like to reach Brad or I, drop me a note. I can easily get it to Brad, and we're happy to continue the dialogue further. And I think that's about all the time we have, I think. Thank you.